The Vthkai had ruled the stars for 3,000 years, and no species had ever dared to challenge them. Their empires stretched across 47 star systems, and every world within their borders knew the cold grip of fear. They were massive creatures, standing 9 feet tall, with black armored skin and eyes that burned like dying embers. Their warships blocked out the light of suns, and their armies numbered in the billions. When humanity first made contact with the galaxy, the Vthkai barely noticed them. Earth was a small world on the edge of known space, and its people were primitive by galactic standards. The humans had only recently learned to travel faster than light, and their ships were tiny compared to the great warships of the Dominion. Admiral Kethvor was given the task of bringing humanity under Vthkai control. It was considered an easy job beneath his talents. He arrived in Earth's solar system with 200 warships and gave the humans a simple choice: submit or be destroyed. The humans tried to talk first. A group led by Ambassador Nathan Cole met with Kethvor on his flagship. Cole was a calm man with silver hair and many years of experience in making peace between enemies. He believed that even the most hostile groups could find common ground. "We only want to live in peace," Cole told the towering Vthkai admiral. "There is room in this galaxy for both our peoples." Kethvor made a clicking sound that passed for laughter among his kind. "There is room for servants and masters. You will learn which you are." The terms were absolute. Humanity would give up all military ships. They would send 30% of their people to work in Vthkai mines. They would accept Dominion rulers on every major world. Anyone who resisted would die. Earth's government, the Terran Alliance, refused these terms. They knew they could not beat the Vthkai in a straight fight, but they would not send billions of their people into subjugation, slavery. Instead, they quietly began moving civilians to underground shelters and hidden places. They hoped to survive long enough for something to change. Kethvor was not patient. When the deadline passed, he ordered his fleet to begin the conquest of Earth. His ships descended on the major cities, and their weapons turned tall buildings to dust. Millions died in the first hour. But the humans did not surrender. They fought with everything they had, even though their weapons barely scratched the shields of Vthkai ships. Kethvor found their resistance amusing at first, then annoying. He expected them to give up within days, but instead they held on for weeks, then months. The turning point came on a spring morning in what had once been the American Midwest. A small group of vehicles was fleeing the ruins of Kansas City, carrying refugees towards safety in the Rocky Mountains. Among them was a school bus filled with children, along with a few teachers and parents. Vthkai patrol ships stopped the convoy. Under normal conditions, they would have simply destroyed the vehicles from above. But Lieutenant Zareth, the patrol commander, was in a bad mood. The humans had attacked one of his squads the day before, killing 6 warriors with homemade bombs. He wanted to make them pay. The patrol ships landed, and Zareth led his soldiers to the convoy himself. The refugees were pulled from their vehicles and forced to kneel on the burned ground. Zareth walked among them, his armored boots crushing broken glass. He stopped in front of the school bus. "What is this?" he demanded. A woman stepped forward with a pale face but a steady voice. Her name was Karen Murphy, and she had been a third-grade teacher before the invasion. "These are children. They are no threat to you. Please let them go." Zareth looked at her for a moment, then at the bus full of small, frightened faces. In Vthkai culture, the young of conquered species were, sometimes, taken as servants and raised to be loyal to the Dominion. But Zareth had no interest in such things. He wanted to send a message. "Your people refuse to submit," he said. "Perhaps this will teach them the cost of fighting back." What happened next was recorded by the cameras on the helmets of Zareth's soldiers. The footage would eventually reach human hands, pass through secret networks, until it arrived at the headquarters of the resistance. It showed Zareth walking onto the bus. It showed him dragging a 7-year-old boy named Danny Sullivan into the open. It showed the child crying and calling for his mother. It showed Zareth killing him slowly, while Karen Murphy screamed and the other children watched in horror. Zareth then ordered his soldiers to kill the remaining adults and take the surviving children as prisoners. But before they could obey, something unexpected happened. Karen Murphy, who had spent her whole life teaching young children, pulled a hidden knife from her sleeve and drove it into a gap in Zareth's armor. She did not kill him. The blade was too small, and she hit nothing important. But she wounded him and drew his blood and made him stumble. In his shock and anger, Zareth ordered his soldiers to kill everyone, including the children. They did. Karen Murphy died, trying to shield 2 of her students with her own body. The last thing she saw was the barrel of a Vthkai weapon. The convoy was reduced to ash and bone. Zareth reported the incident as a minor fight with human rebels. He expected no consequences. He was wrong. The footage reached Admiral Nathan Cole 3 days later. He was no longer an ambassador. When the invasion began, he had been called back to military service. He watched the recording in silence, and his face grew pale. Cole had known Danny Sullivan. The boy's father, Patrick Sullivan, was an officer in what remained of the human Navy, serving aboard the carrier Relentless. Had met Danny at a family gathering before the war, and had watched the boy run across the deck with the pure joy that only children have. He watched Danny die. He watched the children on that bus die. He watched Karen Murphy fight with her bare hands to protect her students. And something inside Nathan Cole, something that had survived decades of making peace and finding compromise, finally broke. He knew in that moment that everything had changed. The Vthkai had made a terrible mistake. They believed that cruelty would make humanity submit. They did not understand that they had just awakened something far more dangerous than they could imagine. They had awakened the wrath of a species that would rather burn the galaxy than kneel. And that wrath was only beginning. Admiral Nathan Cole called an emergency meeting of the Alliance Command Council. The surviving military leaders gathered in a bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains. Their faces shone on glowing screens from hidden locations around the world. Cole played the footage without saying a word first. When it ended, there was silence. "We have been fighting to survive," Cole said quietly. "We have been hiding and retreating, and hoping that somehow things would change. I now believe we were wrong." General Maria Santos, commander of ground forces in the Western region, spoke first. Her voice was rough and barely controlled. "What are you saying, Admiral?" "War," Cole replied. "Not resistance, not survival. War. The kind of war that makes the enemy regret ever knowing our name." "We do not have the ships," said Admiral Christopher Hayes, who commanded what was left of the Pacific Fleet. "We do not have the weapons. The Vthkai are stronger than us in every way, in ways they cannot measure." Cole leaned forward, and his eyes burned with something his colleagues had never seen before. "The Vthkai rule through fear. They believe cruelty will break us. They do not understand what they have awakened." Cole explained his plan. It was not the plan of a man who believed in peaceful solutions. It was the plan of a species that had decided it would rather die than submit. The first step was spreading the truth. The footage of Danny Sullivan's murder was sent to every human settlement still in contact with the resistance. It was broadcast on every working channel, and played in every bunker and refugee camp and hidden military base. Within 2 days, every human on Earth knew what had happened on that Kansas road. The reaction was immediate and universal. People who had been hiding emerged from their shelters demanding weapons. Scientists who had been keeping their knowledge secret began sharing it freely and working day and night to create new technology. Engineers who had been maintaining basic systems turned their skills to building weapons of war. But the biggest change was in how people thought. Before Danny Sullivan's death, many humans had still hoped for some kind of deal with the Vthkai. That hope died with him. What replaced it was not despair, but rage, a cold, patient fury that would not rest until the Vthkai paid for every drop of human blood they had spilled. The second part of Cole's plan targeted Vthkai supplies. Human forces that had been focused on defense began launching attacks on supply lines and communication towers and fuel stations. The attacks were small, but they never stopped. Every time the Dominion forces set up a new supply route, human fighters appeared to destroy it. Lieutenant Commander Patrick Sullivan led many of these missions. When he learned of his son's death, he did not cry. He did not break. He simply walked to the weapons room of the Relentless, selected the largest explosives available, and volunteered for the most dangerous missions his commanders could give him. His first mission was to destroy a Vthkai fuel station in what had once been Arizona. The station was guarded by 200 soldiers and a group of patrol ships. Sullivan went in with a team of 12 volunteers. They killed everyone. Sullivan personally executed the station commander. He looked the alien in its burning eyes and spoke a single sentence before pulling the trigger. His name was Danny. The fuel station's destruction was the first of many. Over the following weeks, Sullivan and his team hit target after target, always leaving the same message painted on the walls in Vthkai blood. Remember Danny Sullivan. Admiral Kethvor watched his occupation fall apart and did not understand what was happening. In his experience, conquered species became more obedient over time, not more aggressive. The humans were supposed to be broken and grateful for whatever mercy the Dominion chose to give them. Instead, they seemed to be getting stronger. He asked for more ships from the High Council. The response was dismissive. Earth was a minor world, and the humans were primitive. Surely Kethvor could handle a few rebels without help. Kethvor responded with more brutality. He ordered revenge killings in every area where resistance activity was found. For every Vthkai soldier killed, 100 humans would die. For every supply station destroyed, a city would burn. This tactic had worked on dozens of other species. It did not work on humanity. For every human the Vthkai killed, 2 more took up arms. For every city they burned, the survivors scattered into the wilderness and formed new resistance groups. The killings did not break human spirit, they fed it. Colonel Lisa Monroe commanded resistance forces in the European region. She had been a military historian before the war, studying rebel conflicts. Understood something that Kethvor did not. Terror only works against those who fear death more than they hate their oppressors. The Vthkai have made a huge mistake, she told her officers at a meeting in a bunker beneath the Alps. They believe enough pain will make us submit. They do not realize they have already caused the worst pain possible. After watching children murdered for sport, what do we have left to fear? Monroe began using tactics from every guerrilla war in human history. Her forces did not fight in the open, which they could not win. Instead, they made the occupation of Earth as costly as possible. They poisoned water used by Vthkai troops. They broke vehicles and equipment. They killed officers and leaders, striking without warning and disappearing before anyone could respond. They spread false information, luring enemy patrols into traps. Most importantly, they never stopped. The Vthkai were used to quick, easy conquests. They had overwhelming power and expected that power to give them control. But control requires more than weapons. It requires the cooperation, or at least the silence, of the conquered people. Humanity refused to cooperate. 6 months after Danny Sullivan's death, the occupation of Earth had become a disaster. Vthkai losses were growing steadily, not from big battles, but from 1,000 small wounds. The soldiers who had expected easy duty on a conquered world found themselves in constant danger, unable to trust anything or anyone. And in the darkness of human bunkers and hidden bases, a new weapon was taking shape. Something that would change everything. Something that would turn the hunted into the hunters. The Vthkai had awakened a sleeping giant, and that giant was learning how to fight back. Dr. Rebecca Foster had spent 20 years studying physics before the invasion. When the Vthkai came, she was working on a secret project at a laboratory in New Mexico, developing experimental engines that might one day let humanity explore distant stars. That project was now useless. Humanity did not need to explore the stars, it needed to burn them. Foster led a team of scientists and engineers in what had become known as the Phoenix Project. Their goal was simple: develop weapons that could threaten Vthkai warships. The task seemed impossible. Vthkai technology was hundreds of years ahead of humanity's, and their shields could stop anything humans had. But Foster had something the Vthkai did not expect. She was brilliant and creative and filled with rage. Her brother had been on vacation in Tokyo when the invasion began. The Vthkai had destroyed the city in the first hour of the attack. Foster had searched for any sign of survivors, knowing there were none. She turned that grief into her work. For months, she studied every piece of information the Resistance had gathered on Vthkai technology, looking for weaknesses. She ran tests and experiments and pushed her team to their limits. And finally, she found it. Vthkai shields worked on a specific energy pattern that made them nearly impossible to break through with normal weapons. But Foster discovered that this pattern could be disrupted by a carefully designed pulse of energy. The disruption only lasted a few seconds, but seconds were enough. "It is like a door," she explained to Admiral Cole during a secret transmission. "Their shields are a door, and we have been trying to break it down. What I have found is the key." Cole ordered immediate production of the new weapon called the Foster Pulse Generator. The devices were small enough to fit on human fighters and missiles. Within weeks, the first units were sent to resistance forces around the world. Results were immediate and devastating. A Vthkai patrol group intercepted some human fighters over the Atlantic Ocean. The aliens expected an easy kill. Instead, the lead human pilot, Captain Jake Morrison, activated his pulse generator at the moment of contact. The Vthkai shields flickered and died, just long enough for his wingmen to fire their weapons. 3 Vthkai patrol ships fell burning into the sea. It was the first time human forces had destroyed enemy ships in direct combat since the invasion began. The news spread through the resistance like fire. Humanity could fight back. Humanity could win. Admiral Kethvor received the report with disbelief. His officers had to confirm the information 3 times before he accepted that human fighters had actually destroyed Dominion ships. It should have been impossible. Human technology was primitive. But the proof was undeniable. Something had changed. Kethvor immediately ordered a captured human fighter brought to him for study. When his engineers examined the pulse generator, they were shocked. The device used a weakness that Vthkai scientists had known about for centuries, but had never bothered to fix. Why would they? No conquered species had ever been smart enough to find it. The humans had found it in months. Kethvor finally began to understand that he was not dealing with ordinary primitives. These creatures learned faster than any species the Dominion had ever met. They adapted, and they created, and they refused to accept the limits that should have held them back. And they were very angry. He sent an urgent message to the High Council, warning that the human war was becoming more serious than expected. The Council sent a group to assess the situation. They did not send more ships. While Kethvor waited, the war on Earth grew fiercer. Human forces, now equipped with Foster pulse generators, began attacking Vthkai patrol ships and supply vessels. With increasing success, the Resistance gained control of the skies over large parts of the planet, forcing the occupation forces to stay in fortified positions. But Cole knew that controlling the skies was not enough. The Vthkai still controlled space, and their massive warships could destroy any target on the planet's surface. As long as those ships remained, humanity could not truly win. That was when Colonel Lisa Monroe proposed the boldest operation of the war. "We capture a Vthkai warship," she said with a calm voice. "We learn how it works, we build more. The plan was crazy. Vthkai warships were crewed by thousands of soldiers and protected by security systems that had never been broken. No conquered species had ever successfully boarded a Dominion ship, let alone captured one. Admiral Cole listened to Monroe's briefing in silence. When she finished, he asked a single question. "How many volunteers do you need?" Monroe gathered a strike force of 200 soldiers drawn from the most experienced resistance fighters on the planet. Each of them had lost family to a Vthkai. Each of them volunteered without hesitation. Patrick Sullivan was among them. The target was a Vthkai destroyer in orbit around Earth. The ship was called the Blade of Dominion, and it had killed more humans than any other vessel in the occupation fleet. The attack was launched on a dark night, using a mix of captured Vthkai shuttles and human stealth technology. The Blade's crew detected nothing until Monroe's forces were already inside. What followed was 4 hours of brutal close combat. The humans fought through corridor after corridor, clearing each section with grenades and rifles, and when necessary, their bare hands. The Vthkai defenders outnumbered them 10 to 1. It did not matter. Patrick Sullivan led the assault on the bridge. He killed 11 Vthkai soldiers himself, including the ship's captain. When the bridge was secured, he found himself standing before the main view screen, looking down at the blue curve of Earth. "Danny," he whispered, "I am coming for all of them." The capture of the Blade of Dominion sent shockwaves through the Vthkai Empire. It was the first time in recorded history that a Dominion warship had been taken by a conquered species. The High Council could no longer dismiss the human conflict as a minor problem. They ordered Admiral Kethfor to crush the rebellion immediately, by any means necessary. Reinforcements were finally sent. 20 additional warships, with enough firepower to turn Earth's surface to glass. But the humans were no longer fighting only on Earth. Using the captured destroyer, human engineers had begun copying Vthkai technology at amazing speed. Within months, they had developed their own faster-than-light drive, and their own shields, and their own powerful weapons, and they had built ships to carry them. Warship of the new class was named the Vengeance. It was smaller than a Vthkai destroyer and less elegant in design, but it was fast and powerful and crewed by men and women who had nothing left to lose. Admiral Cole took personal command. The war was about to enter a new phase. The Vthkai High Council met in their capital city on the throne world of Vthka Prime. The chamber was huge and designed to impress visitors with the power of the Dominion. Glowing displays showed the extent of their empire, with 47 star systems and thousands of ships and billions of soldiers. And one small planet that refused to submit. Grand Admiral Zethrak, the supreme commander of all Dominion military forces, reviewed the latest reports from Earth with growing worry. The humans had captured another warship. They had attacked 3 Vthkai supply convoys. They had built a shipyard somewhere in their solar system, hidden from the eyes in orbit. Worse, the rebellion was spreading. Other species within the Dominion, species that had been slaves for centuries, were beginning to show signs of unrest. They had heard the stories of human resistance. They had heard of a primitive species that had wounded their masters. Some had begun to ask dangerous questions. If the humans could fight back, why not them? "This cannot continue," Zethrak declared. "The humans must be made an example. Their world must burn, and their species must be wiped out. Every other civilization in our domain must understand the price of fighting back." He ordered the gathering of the largest fleet in Dominion history. 500 warships would descend upon Earth and reduce it to ash. No surrender would be accepted. No prisoners would be taken. Humanity would be erased from existence. The fleet departed Vthka Prime with great ceremony, and their ships stretched across the void like a river of death. Grand Admiral Zethrak himself commanded from the flagship, the World Breaker. It was a vessel so massive it cast shadows across moons. They expected to find a broken enemy, desperate and outnumbered. They found the Vengeance. Admiral Nathan Cole had anticipated the Vthkai response. He knew that eventually the Dominion would send overwhelming force to destroy humanity. He had prepared accordingly. The human fleet numbered only 50 ships, a fraction of the Vthkai armada. But each vessel was crewed by men and women who had sworn to die before surrendering. Each was equipped with the latest human technology, including advanced Foster pulse generators and weapons copied from captured Vthkai ships. And they were not alone. In the months since the capture of the Blade of Dominion, human agents had been working throughout the Dominion, making contact with other enslaved species. They had shared the technology of the pulse generator. They had shared the tactics of resistance. They had shared the story of Danny Sullivan and Karen Murphy, and every human who had died rather than kneel. And they had made allies. When the Vthkai fleet arrived in Earth's solar system, they found themselves facing not 50 ships, but 300. The Korath, a reptilian species enslaved for 2,000 years, sent their hidden fleet. The Mathani insect-like beings whose homeworld had been stripped bare by the Dominion had contributed every vessel they had. A dozen other species, some of whom had never fought before, had answered humanity's call. Grand Admiral Zethrax stared at the tactical display in disbelief. This is impossible. These species were conquered. They were broken. No, came a voice over the fleet-wide communication channel. It was Admiral Cole broadcasting from the bridge of the Vengeance. They were waiting. They were waiting for someone to show them that the Vthkai could be defeated. They were waiting for hope. Cole paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was cold. You took that hope from my people when you murdered our children, but you could not kill it. You only made it stronger. Now that hope has spread to every corner of your empire, and it will burn you all. The Battle of Seoul, as it would later be known, lasted for 72 hours. It was then largest space battle in galactic history, and the worst defeat ever suffered by the Vthkai Dominion. The pulse generators devastated the Vthkai fleet. Ships that had been unbeatable for thousands of years suddenly found themselves vulnerable, with their shields failing at the worst possible moments. The Allied forces struck with perfect coordination, targeting command ships and weapons platforms, and crippling the enemy's ability to fight back. Patrick Sullivan commanded a squadron of fighters during the battle. He destroyed 14 Vthkai vessels himself, including a cruiser that had been attacking a refugee convoy. With each kill, he whispered his son's name. Colonel Lisa Monroe led a boarding action against the World Breaker itself. Her team fought their way to the engine room and planted explosive charges that tore the vessel apart from within. Grand Admiral Zethrak died when his flagship broke apart, still unable to understand how primitives had defeated him. When the battle ended, the Vthkai fleet had been reduced to scattered survivors fleeing toward the edge of the system. Over 300 enemy vessels had been destroyed. The Allied losses were significant, but survivable. Earth was free. But Admiral Cole had no intention of stopping there. He stood on the bridge of the Vengeance, watching the last Vthkai ships run away. Around him his crew celebrated their victory, but Cole's face remained grim. He knew this was not the end. The Vthkai still ruled 47 star systems. Billions of beings still lived under their cruel control. The Dominion was wounded, but not dead. And as long as it existed, it would be a threat to humanity and every other free species in the galaxy. We have won a battle, Cole said quietly to his senior officers. But the war is far from over. The Vthkai will regroup, and they will come for us again, unless we go to them first. He turned to face the stars. Bring the fight to their doorstep. It is time to show the galaxy that the age of Vthkai rule is over. It is time for a reckoning. The Allied commanders agreed. They had tasted victory, and they wanted more. Species that had been slaves for centuries saw their chance for freedom, and they would not let it pass. The liberation of Earth was only the beginning. Now humanity would lead an alliance across the stars to finish what the Vthkai had started. They would free every enslaved world and tear down an empire that had ruled through fear for 3,000 years. And they would make sure that no child would ever die the way Danny Sullivan had died again. Admiral Cole assembled the Allied commanders aboard the Vengeance. The glowing display showed the Orion sector, the vast territory still controlled by the Vthkai. 47 star systems filled with countless worlds and billions of slaves. "We have two choices," Cole said. "We can protect our own borders and hope that the Vthkai leave us alone, or we can finish what they started." The Korath commander, a scarred veteran named Rathkon, spoke first. "My people have been slaves for 2,000 years. We have dreamed of this moment for generations. We will not stop until Vthka Prime itself burns." Similar words came from the other Allied commanders. Species that had been crushed for centuries saw their chance for freedom. They would not let it pass. Colonel Monroe outlined the campaign strategy. The Allied fleet would advance through Vthkai space, freeing each system in turn. They would avoid unnecessary destruction, targeting military bases while offering conquered systems. Species the chance to join the alliance. "We are not the Vthkai," she emphasized. "We do not make war on civilians. We do not murder children. We fight soldiers, and we free slaves. That is how we win not just battles, but hearts." The campaign lasted 3 years. It was brutal and bloody and costly, but the outcome was never truly in doubt. The Vthkai had ruled through fear, and fear had made them lazy. They had never needed to change, or grow, or improve. Their enemies had always been too weak to challenge them. Humanity was not weak. Human technology advanced at a speed that terrified the Vthkai commanders. Every captured ship and every piece of enemy equipment was studied and improved upon. Human engineers developed shields stronger than anything the Dominion had. Human scientists created weapons that could punch through the heaviest armor. And human soldiers, driven by memories of the invasion, fought with a fury that the Vthkai could not match. Sullivan rose to the rank of captain during the campaign. His ship, the Remembrance, became famous throughout the Alliance for its daring raids behind enemy lines. He never stopped fighting and never stopped pushing forward. Some said he was looking for death. Others said he was looking for something else. The truth was simpler. He was looking for justice. System after system fell to the Alliance. The Vthkai fought back with everything they had, but it was not enough. Their forces were spread too thin across their vast empire. Their conquered subjects were rising up everywhere, inspired by the human example. Their officers had never faced an enemy that refused to break. One by one, the chains of the Dominion were shattered. Worlds that had known nothing but slavery for 1,000 years suddenly found themselves free. Species that had forgotten how to fight remembered when they saw humans standing beside them. The final battle took place in orbit around Vthka Prime itself. The Vthkai had gathered every remaining ship for a last stand, determined to protect their homeworld at any cost. The Allied fleet outnumbered them 3-1. Admiral Cole offered the Vthkai High Council a chance to surrender. They refused. They could not imagine a universe where they were not the masters. "Very well," Cole said quietly. "Then you will learn what you taught us." The Battle of Vthka Prime was short. The Allied fleet crushed the Vthkai defenders with overwhelming force. Human Marines landed on the throne world itself and secured the capital city within hours. Patrick Sullivan led the assault on the High Council chamber. He fought his way through the last Vthkai guards, cutting them down without mercy. When he reached the chamber itself, he found the surviving council members huddled in their seats, unable to flee. They looked at him with fear. Sullivan walked to the center of the chamber, surrounded by enemies who had terrorized the galaxy for thousands of years. He thought of Danny and of Karen Murphy and of all the children who had died on that Kansas road. He thought of the millions of humans who had died during the invasion. He thought of the billions of slaves who had suffered under Vthkai rule. And then he did something that no Vthkai expected. He lowered his weapon. "You are prisoners of the Galactic Alliance," he said with a steady voice. "You will face trial for your crimes against humanity and all the other species you have hurt. You will answer for what you have done, and you will spend the rest of your lives knowing that the primitives you hated were the ones who brought your empire down." He turned and walked away, leaving the defeated rulers of the Dominion to think about their fate. The war was over. The Vthkai Empire had fallen, and in its place stood an alliance of free peoples who had been inspired by humanity's example. The species that had been slaves were now partners in building a new order based not on fear but on cooperation. And in a small cemetery on Earth, in the rolling hills of Kansas, Admiral Nathan Cole stood before a simple grave marker. It bore the name of a 7-year-old boy who had never understood why the monsters came from the sky. "We won," Danny Cole said softly. "They thought killing you would break us. Instead, it showed us who we really are. We are not slaves. We are not victims. We are humanity, and we will never kneel." He placed a single flower on the grave and walked away toward a future that Danny Sullivan would never see but had helped to create. The Vthkai had ruled through fear. They had learned too late that some species cannot be frightened into giving up. Some species, when pushed to the edge, push back. Some species take their pain and grief and rage and turn them into weapons that can tear empires apart. Humanity was such a species, and the galaxy would never forget it.